Thanks for joining us for another episode from the 2025 eMTB Shootout here at Zion Mountain Ranch, Utah. Today, we're going to be reviewing the GasGas ECC 6. Let's get into it. So before we get into this 160, 170 millimeter Enduro eMTB, we'd like to take a quick second and thank all of our sponsors for helping make this series possible. We've got 12 bikes and have been out here at Zion Mountain Ranch for about 2 weeks testing them all. So without their support, we couldn't make these types of series happen. So thanks to Fox Racing for keeping us protected on the trail and looking good. Also thanks to Schwalbe Tires. We've outfitted all of our test bikes with their Magic Mary and Albert gravity casing radial tires and have been absolutely enjoying them here on the trails. And also thanks to Velocirax for helping us transport our bikes safely from trail to trail. So let's get into the GasGas.
All right, run one on the GasGas, gas.
All right, so our ECC6 is the only bike on test with the SRAM Eagle Powertrain. Has 90 newton meters of torque, 680 watts of peak power, and a 630 watt hour battery, which can be easily removed by removing this fairing down here at the bottom. You've got the AXS bridge display, similar to some of the other Brose systems like the Specialized last year. SRAM AXS pods on both ends control the reverb AXS dropper post, the shifter, your mode select between rally and range, SRAM code RSC brakes. Rounding out suspension, we've got a set of DVO Onyx D1 CV OTT fork powered by WP and a Jade coil.
So essentially what that means is it's a DVO chassis with some internal tunings collaborated on by WP, which is traditionally a motocross suspension company and one that GasGas, being a motorcycle company, they've collaborated and worked on in the past. So it's been a pretty cool partnership and certainly offers a bit of a unique feel out on the trail inside a traditional DVO chassis. So Sean, you forgot one other very unique feature about this frame.
I mean, how could I? The fairings. It gives you that dirt bike look, as I mean, you would expect from a GasGas.
Yeah, and we know you love red dirt bikes.
I do. I can't deny that.
Is your Honda jealous at home when you ride this?
I can't say it is, even though I've probably ridden this more than my dirt bike. Under those plastic fairings is a carbon fiber frame. You can easily remove the fairings if you so wish, but
well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I guess. And for those of you who don't like the looks of the frame or the potential cable rattling, there are kind of some little rubber grommet plugs that you can stick into the holes where these sort of pop into. So yeah, 160, 170 travel, dual 29-inch wheels, and the longest wheelbase overall, mostly, well, I should say entirely, due to the longest chainstays in the group test by a long shot. I think they're 15 millimeters longer than the longest bike. I think 465 is the chainstay length on these. And just to kind of give you an idea of how long that is, the reach is only 475, which is one of the shorter reaches in the group test, yet the bike is still the longest. So I think that makes for kind of maybe a polarizing and a unique feel out on the trail. And another polarizing number, which we'll touch on as well, is going to be the stack height. You may notice we've got this thing dropped down pretty far. This thing has a very tall stack, which definitely also was a bit of a learning curve and something that I found wasn't ideal for my riding style. So I dropped them quite a bit. I think everyone else has kept it down there low as well.
Yeah, no reason to raise it up even higher.
Yeah. So
GasGas offers the ECC in a 4, which comes in at $69.99, and the 6 model here, which comes in at $10.99.
Yep, so with one model in the middle.
Yep, smack dab in the middle, which is probably the model we would end up.
I disagree. Yeah, I would say none of them are amazing values at retail price. Obviously, given with what's going on right now with the Pure Mobility Group, which is the owner of GasGas, KTM, Husqvarna. You probably could find these on deal. But yeah, $10.99. It's not a screaming value, I would say.
Not compared to some of the other bikes that we have on test. The DVO fork. Coming up with that air suspension or the air pressure number to put in the fork has proven to be quite a guessing game almost. On DVO's recommended air pressures is way off than what we ended up running, I think.
Yeah, I think that most of our riders had a little bit of a tough time referencing the suggested air pressure versus what actually felt good on the trail. It maybe got a little bit closer the more we rode the bike and the more the fork broke in. I know the first few times that I was riding it several months ago when we made a dissected video on the bike, I was way off. And then as maybe the fork broke in and I got used to the technology inside of the fork and the differences it provided on the trail, I changed my air pressure, but it certainly is a fork that it kind of feels like maybe the harder you ride it, the better it feels. It has a tendency, I think, to feel a little bit stiff off the top. So kind of in some cornering scenarios, it can feel like it just takes a little bit more to get that blow off valve, so to speak, to open up and get that shock or the fork compliant and moving. So moving into the drive unit, the 2 modes, did having just range or rally affect you mentally at all? I mean, some bikes are just so customizable, and this is just like, you got 2 modes, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, without pairing it to the SRAM app and really going into like fine-tuning the tunes, just having I mean, I only really set in rally, and that's it. That's all I needed.
Okay.
I mean, and for our short climbs here at Zion Mountain Ranch, it was plenty.
Okay.
That 90 Newton meters gives you enough. It does feel like you're working a little bit harder than, say, some of the Bosch motors, especially the new specialized motor and the DJI motor, obviously, but I think it offered a very manageable power delivery.
Yeah, I think in the stock setting, it definitely seemed like there was a little bit more rider input required to match, I guess, the drive unit's assistant, which is kind of similar to what we said last year at our last e-bike shootout. So, you know, depending on the type of rider you are, if you're looking for like a real soft pedal, easy spin versus like wanting to give a little more input and effort, yeah, that's something to note. Moving into the other side of the climbing element, which is geometry, I would say the bike was a pretty solid climber in my opinion. I think the coil shock gave some really solid traction, combined with the long rear end meant steep climbs were really easy. Kind of just like eating itself up rocks. It was something you could just really just put the pedals down and get yourself up there. The long rear end sometimes would be a little tricky if it was very steppy or shelfy, where like the rear end would maybe want to hold up or hang. You would just have to time your strokes and that lift a little bit differently, but same could be said around like really tight switchbacks, or like when you have to like thread the needle through a bunch of technical rock gardens like we have back on our home test trail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, climbing it's a comfortable climber, I think, and for a lot of our stuff, it does the job. And
Okay.
I think for a lot of people, it would do the job.
Over at Flying Monkey, it felt rather long, hard to wiggle around a lot of the tighter sections. When the trail did straighten out and it got pretty steep and chunky, it did feel good, picked up a lot of speed. I was able to kind of catch back up to somebody.
How's the suspension feel when you get those straightaways when you're opening it up?
I feel like the front end is a little, I'm not kind of synced up with the rear here. It feels all right.
How's the power feel on the SRAM drive unit climb? And
Pretty,
2 modes.
pretty good. Yeah, I mean, I was a little surprised that there was 2 modes, but like I'm not like looking for another mode right now between rally and range. It was good.
So do you agree with Frenchie's sentiment when it comes to plowing down rough stuff at speeds about the bike?
Yeah, it's a planted, just full send, don't think, no holds barred charger. The downside of all that stability and long wheelbase is when things start getting tighter and like switchbacks. I mean, our time at Post Canyon when I was on this thing, on the Loamers, it was fantastic. The super steep stuff, it was just a straight line. But then we got into some of the trails where it was tight switchbacks and like the trail was this wide. And that's where the shortcomings really started to present itself.
Ah! Oh.
Boy.
Oh,
Wow.
The limo made it.
Wow.
Like, I struggled to get around corners. I had to slow way down. I was blowing off trail, but that's not what this bike I think is really meant for.
Yeah, it's certainly built to go fast and hammer down rough, chunky terrain at speed, give a stable, predictable feel. The weight distribution on this bike I think is pretty well balanced and centered. Although the reach is a little bit short. I'm 5'11", you're 6'2". Most of our other testers are in that 6 foot to 6'2", 3-ish range. And I think a lot of us kind of thought that the longer end helped offset the slightly shorter reach for some riders. But it just really kind of put you in the middle of the bike and kept traction out back really, really nicely. And I would say the Code RSC brakes, you know, when you're coming off Mavens or the new TRP Evo Pro brakes, you know, there was a little less power out of them in certain scenarios. And so sometimes that meant coming into stuff a little hotter than you were expecting. And the bike was always ready for it. I mean, you know, Frenchie is known for going loose, wild, and sideways. And this bike didn't flinch. Like, he was charged on this thing and just kept turning around and giving it more and more and more. And the bike was ready for it every run. So I think certain riders in certain types of conditions or trail types are gonna really enjoy the bike. But just be known, if you thread the needle a lot, if you've got tighter, more technical terrain where you don't quite have the space for a big long wheelbase, may not be the ideal rig for you. Sean, obviously we've got 12 bikes in the shootout. When you're looking at fit, finish, paint, how does the bike stack up against the competitors?
I'd say it's pretty middle of the pack. I feel like the fairings do kind of lower it a little bit, at least in my opinion.
Okay.
The paint doesn't seem to be as durable as some of the other bikes too. Like, it's got a lot of road rash. But I will say that the SRAM integration is probably some of the better than some of the other bikes on test, because obviously the whole ecosystem. So, and we've only got one cable running into the frame, and it's a much cleaner presentation. It just doesn't scream high dollar, I don't think.
Okay. You know, maybe it's just that it's red. I feel like the paint quality is actually pretty decent. I feel like it's a fairly rich color, and that the clear coat looks like it's pretty thick and nice. The rear triangle to me though just isn't quite as refined. Like, you know, if I look at the front of the bike, fairings aside, right, because that's polarizing, you know, I've kind of grown to get used to it and accept that this bike is what it is. I think the white coil with the white lettering, like, I think it's a pretty cool looking bike for the most part, but the seat stay in particular, and even the chainstay a little bit, isn't quite as refined and modern looking, I would say, especially for the price point of the bike. But overall, I think, you know, I think just about everything has stayed tight on the bike. Like, nothing is rattled loose. So overall, I think it's a pretty competitive bike and package overall.
The one thing that it does do better than everything else though is that metal skid plate.
Oh, the skid plate. That's right. That thing is burly and awesome. And if you look at the bottom of it, and you look at the bottom of some other bikes who don't even have skid plates anymore, we are a big fan of that. And I guess coming from like an enduro motorcycle brand, that makes sense. So props to GasGas for making a really sweet skid plate bash guard. Who do you think the ideal rider is for this?
Someone that's got, I'd say, a bit more sustained chunky trails, maybe the GasGas fan, moto riders. I wouldn't recommend it for those that have tighter trails though, or those that want a significantly more powerful bike.
Okay, yep, yeah, good points for sure. I would agree. The tall stack height, the weight, the length mean it's not the most poppy and lively bike, in my opinion. If you are looking for something that's stable, it's predictable, it will give you confidence to attack and descend really rough, chundery stuff. You like climbing really steep trails, I think it's a pretty solid package overall. Again, the value proposition, you know, is one to consider for sure amongst other bikes out on the category. But from a performance standpoint, if you've got the terrain that will make this bike happy, you will be happy. It's a pretty sweet machine overall. So thank you guys very much for tuning in and watching. Stay tuned as we work our way through the series towards the grand finale in our 2025 eMTB Shootout. We would like to once again thank Fox Racing, Schwalbe Tires Velocirax, and Zion Mountain Ranch for making this series possible. Thanks again, guys, and we'll see you out on the trails.